Part 1. The Hidden Omega. The East Wing hadn't been opened in 7 years. 17 summers locked behind mahogany doors with iron bolts. 17 years of darkness, cobwebs gathering in corners, and a girl who learned to count time by the changing angle of sunlight through a single barred window. Her name was Sarah Blackthorne, and her family wanted the world to forget she existed. The scars had come when she was 10. A rogue attack during the harvest moon ceremony. While other children screamed and ran, young Sarah had tried to protect her younger brother, throwing herself between him and the feral wolf's claws. The beast's talons had raked across her face, 3 deep gouges from temple to jaw, tearing through flesh and forever marking her as broken. In werewolf society, beauty was currency. For Omegas, it was everything. Her father, Marcus Blackthorne, was a beta in the Silvercrest pack, a family of middling rank with social ambitions that far exceeded their standing. They had clawed their way up through strategic marriages, careful alliances, and an obsessive adherence to pack politics. Sarah's older sister Vivian was flawless. Golden hair, perfect features, the kind of beauty that made alphas stumble over their words. Vivian was the investment. Sarah became the liability. "No one can see her," her mother had hissed the day after the attack, standing outside Sarah's bedroom as healers worked frantically to close the wounds. "Not until it heals. Not until she looks normal again." But werewolf healing doesn't work on scars inflicted by other werewolves. The claw marks that should have faded remained. 3 thick, ropey lines of scar tissue that pulled at her skin, twisting the right side of her face into a permanent reminder of that night. Her mother never forgave her for it. Within a month, they'd moved her to the East Wing, the forgotten part of the Blackthorne estate where old furniture went to rot and family secrets were buried behind locked doors. They told the pack she'd been sent away to a special academy, that she was being educated in the Southern Territories, that she'd return when she was ready. No one questioned it. Omegas disappeared all the time, shuffled off to wherever defective wolves went when they no longer served their purpose. Sarah learned to live in silence. Her meals came through a slot in the door, cold by the time they reached her. She had books, at least. Her father wasn't completely cruel. Education was still valuable, even for a hidden daughter. She devoured every volume they gave her: history, philosophy, pack law, ancient texts about the moon goddess and the sacred bonds that tied wolves together. She learned about fated mates, the legendary connection that transcended choice, the bond that couldn't be broken, the one sacred thing in their world that was supposed to be pure. And she dreamed. Gods, how she dreamed. Of a mate who would see past her scars. Of someone who would open that door and tell her she was worth more than her face. Of a bond so powerful it would make her family regret every year they'd locked her away. Naive dreams. Childish fantasies. She was 27 now, long past the age when most wolves found their mates. Long past hope. Until the invitation arrived. # Part 2. The summons. "You're going to the wedding." Her mother's voice came through the door, sharp and cold as always. Sarah looked up from her book, barely processing the words. What? Alpha King Daemon has issued a decree. Every unmated wolf in the territory must attend the lunar ceremony. No exceptions. Her mother's tone dripped with disgust. "That includes you." Sarah's heart stuttered. The lunar ceremony, the most sacred gathering of the werewolf world, held once every decade when the moon goddess's power was at its peak. It was where the strongest bonds formed, where fated mates were revealed through ancient ritual. And Alpha King Daemon was attending. Everyone knew the stories. Daemon Silvercrest, the Alpha King who had united the warring packs through sheer dominance and strategic brutality. He'd claimed his title at 19 by defeating 7 challengers in a single night, each death more vicious than the last. Now at 34, he ruled the Northern Territories with absolute authority. He was power incarnate, ruthless, undefeated, and unmated. Why would he issue such a decree? Sarah asked, her voice rough from disuse. She rarely spoke anymore. There was no one to speak to. "Because he's looking for his Luna," her mother snapped. "Every alpha house is scrambling to present their daughters. Your sister has been preparing for months." A pause, heavy with resentment. "But the decree says every unmated wolf. The Moon Council is enforcing it. We have no choice." Sarah understood immediately. Her family would be scrutinized if they arrived without their second daughter. Questions would be asked. Their carefully constructed lie about her education would crumble. Better to bring the scarred Omega and hide her in the crowd than risk exposure. "You'll stay in the back," her mother continued. "You'll keep your head down, you'll wear a veil, and you will not embarrass this family. Vivienne has a real chance with the Alpha King." We won't let you ruin it." The door unlocked. The first time in 17 years, Sarah stood on shaking legs, blinking in the sudden flood of light from the hallway. Her mother stood there, older now, harder. She didn't even look at Sarah's face. "The ceremony is in 3 days. I've left clothes in your room. Burn everything else from this wing. I don't want evidence of what you've been living in." Then she was gone. Sarah stood in the doorway, staring at the world beyond her prison, the grand staircase, the portraits of Blackthorn ancestors, the life that had continued without her. For 17 years, she'd dreamed of this moment. It felt nothing like she'd imagined. Part 3, the Lunar Ceremony. The Grand Luna Temple was a masterpiece of ancient architecture. Marble columns that reached toward the night sky, silver veins running through stone that seemed to glow under the full moon's light. Thousands of wolves had gathered from every corner of the territories, their scents mingling into an overwhelming cocktail of anticipation, ambition, and barely contained aggression. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was a battleground. Sarah arrived with her family, a ghost trailing behind her perfect sister. Vivienne wore crimson silk that clung to her curves, her golden hair cascading in careful waves. Every eye turned to watch her entrance. Alphas practically fell over themselves to catch her attention. Sarah wore gray, a high-necked dress that covered everything, and a black veil that obscured her face. Her mother had been explicit, asterisks, invisible, silent, forgettable. The Blackthorns found their place in the assembly, not close to the front where the high-ranking families stood, but not relegated to the back either. A calculated position that said, "We belong here, but we know our place." Sarah stood at the edge of their group, separated by 2 feet of space. That might as well have been a canyon. Her father didn't acknowledge her. Her mother kept Vivienne close, whispering last-minute instructions. Her younger brother, Dylan, the one she'd saved all those years ago, glanced at her once, his expression unreadable, before looking away. The ceremony began at midnight. Ancient torches burst into silver flame around the temple's perimeter. The moon priestess, draped in white robes that seemed to shimmer with their own light, stepped onto the raised platform at the temple's center. "Children of the moon goddess," her voice carried without effort, filling every corner of the vast space. "We gather under her sacred light to honor the bonds she weaves between souls. Tonight, the veil between destiny and choice grows thin. Tonight, fated mates will be revealed." A collective shiver ran through the crowd. This was what they'd all come for, the chance at a bond that transcended pack politics and social climbing, a connection that couldn't be denied or manipulated. "The Alpha King will open the ceremony," the priestess continued. "As is tradition, the highest-ranking unmated wolf will step forward first." The crowd parted like water, and Damon Silvercrest walked through. Sarah had seen portraits, heard descriptions, none of it prepared her for the reality of him. He moved like violence contained in human form, every step precise, every movement economical. His height made other alphas look small. His presence made them look insignificant. Dark hair, almost black, cut short. A face that was hard angles and sharp edges, handsome in the way a blade is handsome, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Silver, pure, molten silver like the moon itself, and they were scanning the crowd. "The moon goddess has blessed this gathering," the priestess said, raising her arms. "Let those who seek their fated bond step forward into the circle of truth. The goddess will reveal what is meant to be." The circle of truth was exactly what it sounded like, ancient magic carved into the temple floor, silver lines forming intricate patterns that pulsed with supernatural power. Any wolf who stepped inside would be revealed to their fated mate. The bond would snap into place, visible to everyone, undeniable. Dozens of she-wolves surged forward, Vivienne among them, her crimson dress a splash of color in the sea of hopefuls. They arranged themselves around the circle's perimeter, each trying to position themselves in the Alpha King's direct line of sight. Damon didn't look at any of them. His silver eyes continued their methodical sweep of the assembly, narrowed slightly as if searching for something specific. The priestess gestured, and he stepped into the circle's center. The silver lines flared, blazing so bright that wolves had to shield their eyes. Power rolled off Damon in waves, the kind of raw dominance that made lesser wolves want to bow or run. Some of the she-wolves in the circle actually staggered back, unable to withstand the pressure of his aura. But Vivienne held her ground. Of course she did. She'd been trained for this her entire life. The light grew brighter, brighter, the silver lines reaching out like searching fingers, probing the crowd for... The light exploded. and every single silver line shot toward the back of the assembly. Toward Sarah. Part 4. The bond. Sarah felt it before she saw it. A pull. No, a tearing. Something deep inside her chest ripping open, spilling heat through her veins that burned and froze simultaneously. Her wolf, silent for so many years, surged to the surface with a howl that shattered through her mind. Asterisk, mate, mate, mate. The silver light wrapped around her like chains. Gentle and inescapable, she gasped, stumbling back, but there was nowhere to go. The bond was forming, clicking into place with the finality of a lock turning. And everyone was staring. The crowd had gone absolutely silent. Thousands of wolves, struck dumb by what they were witnessing. Because the Alpha King's bond, the most powerful, most anticipated connection of the decade, had just locked on to an unknown Omega in a veil standing at the back of the assembly. Damon's entire body had gone rigid. His silver eyes were locked on her, blazing with an intensity that made her want to shrink into the floor. She could feel him through the bond now, surprise, confusion, and beneath it all, a possessiveness so fierce it stole her breath. The moon priestess stared, her ancient eyes wide with something that looked like shock. "The goddess has spoken," she whispered. "The bond is formed." Sarah's mother made a sound like something dying. "No," Vivian breathed, her perfect face twisting. "No, that's not. She can't be." But the bond didn't care about denial. The silver light was still connecting them, visible to every wolf in the temple. Undeniable. Unbreakable. Damon moved. He crossed the distance between them in seconds, the crowd scattering before him like leaves before a storm. He stopped 3 feet away, his massive frame towering over her, and for a moment he just stared. Then his hand shot out and ripped the veil from her face. The collective gasp was like a physical blow. There she was, exposed, the scars on full display, 3 thick lines that had defined 17 years of her life. In the silver light of the temple, they looked even worse, the scar tissue reflecting the glow in a way that made them seem to pulse. She waited for the rejection, for the disgust, for him to step back and sever the bond the way she'd read about in stories, painful, brutal, but possible if both wolves willed it strongly enough. Damon's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out and traced one scarred line with his finger, from her temple to her jaw. His touch burned. The bond flared white-hot between them. "Who did this to you?" His voice was low, dangerous, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Sarah couldn't speak. Her wolf was going insane, wanting to submit, wanting to fight, wanting to run, all at the same time. The bond was overwhelming, 17 years of isolation making the sudden connection feel like drowning in sunlight. "How?" The command in his voice made every wolf in the temple flinch. Alpha authority, absolute, and undeniable. "A rogue," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "When I was 10, his eyes flashed. His hand was still on her face, thumb now brushing her cheek just below the scars. The gentleness of the gesture contrasted sharply with the rage rolling off him in waves. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Blackthorn." "Blackthorn." He turned his head slightly, his gaze finding her family in the crowd. Her father had gone pale. Her mother looked like she might be sick. Beta Marcus's daughter? Her father stepped forward, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Your Majesty, there's been some mistake. This isn't, we didn't mean for." "Where has she been?" Damon cut him off, his voice dropping to a lethal softness. "I know every prominent family in my territory. I've never seen her before." The silence was deafening. Sarah felt the moment her mother made the decision to lie, saw it in the way her spine straightened, the way she painted on a sympathetic expression. "She's been ill, Your Majesty. Weak constitution. We thought it best she recover away from—" "Liar." The single word cracked like a whip. Her mother actually stumbled back. Damon's hand moved from Sarah's face to her wrist, his fingers circling the thin bones. Even through the bond, she could feel him reading her, scenting the truth that clung to her skin like dust from the East Wing. "This Omega," he said, his voice carrying across the entire assembly, "smells like isolation, like years of being locked away, like abandonment." His grip tightened fractionally on her wrist, "So I'll ask one more time. Beta Marcus, where has she been #? Part 5, The Breaking Point. Marcus Blackthorn had not survived 20 years in pack politics by being stupid. He knew when he was cornered, knew when the only option was to minimize damage. "The East Wing," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "She's been recuperating. The scars from the attack were extensive. We thought it best to give her privacy." 17 years of privacy? The question was razor sharp. Her father's jaw tightened. The scars didn't heal properly. "You can see," he gestured vaguely at Sarah's face. "For an Omega of marriageable age, such disfigurement is unfortunate. We were protecting her from what?" Damon's voice dropped even lower, and this time every wolf in the temple felt the threat in it. From being seen, from living. The tension was suffocating. Wolves shifted nervously, torn between watching the drama unfold and wanting to flee from the Alpha King's rising fury. The bond between Damon and Sarah pulsed with his emotions, and he was furious. But there was something else too. Confusion, conflict. Because despite the bond, despite the moon goddess's choice, he was staring at a scarred Omega who'd been locked away like something shameful. And everyone could see him calculating. Vivian chose that moment to step forward. Of course she did. She'd been trained to seize opportunities, and her sister's public humiliation was exactly that. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "I'm sure this is all very overwhelming for Sarah. She's not accustomed to public gatherings." She placed a delicate hand on her chest, the picture of concerned sympathy. "Perhaps it would be best if the family took her home to rest. The bond can be explored once she's had time to adjust." It was a masterful play, framing it as concern for Sarah while simultaneously planting the seed. "This bond is inconvenient. This Omega is unsuitable. Let us take her away and figure out how to deal with this quietly." The pack was already murmuring. She could hear the whispers spreading through the crowd like poison. "Did you see her face? How can that be the Alpha King's mate? The moon goddess must have made a mistake. He'll reject her. He has to." The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Of course that's what would happen. The bond might be real, might be fated, but it could still be broken. If both parties rejected it, if the Alpha King stood before the assembly and severed the tie, the moon goddess's choice would be overturned. It happened. Not often, but it happened. Usually when the bond formed between enemies or incompatible ranks, a scarred hidden Omega and the Alpha King, that was incompatible by every social measure that mattered. She could feel Damon's eyes on her, could feel him through the bond, sense his wolf warring with his logic. The mate bond was screaming at him to protect, to claim, to keep what the goddess had given him. But he was also a king, a ruler who'd built his power on strategic decisions and ruthless pragmatism. And she was a liability. "Look at me," Damon said softly. Sarah forced her eyes up, meeting that molten silver gaze. Up close, the bond was even stronger. She could feel his wolf, massive and dominant, pressing against hers. Feel the pull to submit, to accept. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Do you want this bond?" No one had ever asked what she wanted. Not in 17 years. Did she want this? Want to be bound to a male who was currently weighing whether she was worth the political complications? Want to subject herself to a world that had already judged her worthless because of scars on her face? Or did she want to reject the bond herself? Save them both the humiliation. Go back to her locked room and disappear as if this night had never happened. The smart answer was rejection. But Sarah had spent 17 years being smart, being quiet, being invisible. "I want," she said slowly, her voice gaining strength, "what the moon goddess chose for me. I want what is mine." A ripple went through the crowd. Bold words from an Omega, especially one addressing the Alpha King. Something flickered in Damon's eyes. Approval? Surprise? His hand was still on her wrist, his thumb now tracing her pulse point. "Even if it means standing before this entire pack?" he asked. "Even if it means being judged, being talked about, being seen?" "I've been invisible for 17 years, Sarah said, and for the first time in her life, she felt something like courage burning in her chest. "I'm tired of hiding." The bond flared between them, responding to her words. She felt Damon's wolf surge, felt his decision crystallize. He turned to face the assembly, still holding her wrist, his grip unbreakable. "The moon goddess has spoken," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "This is my fated mate, my Luna." The crowd exploded. Part 6, the rejection that never came. Chaos erupted in the Grand Luna Temple. Wolves were talking over each other, some in shock, others in outrage. High-ranking alphas who'd brought their daughters to the ceremony looked like they'd been slapped. Her mother had actually collapsed into a chair, her face ashen. Vivienne stood frozen, her perfect features twisted with something ugly, jealousy mixed with disbelief. But Damon wasn't finished. He pulled Sarah forward, positioning her directly in front of him, his massive frame at her back. One hand remained on her wrist, the other moved to her shoulder, a gesture of possession that every wolf in the temple understood. "I know what you're all thinking," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You're calculating, weighing, wondering if I'll reject this bond because my mate doesn't meet your aesthetic standards. You're wondering," he continued, "if the Alpha King could possibly accept an Omega with scars, an Omega who's been hidden away like something shameful, an Omega from a middling Beta family with no political advantages to offer." Sarah felt every word like a knife. Because he was right. That's exactly what they were thinking. What she'd been thinking, too, if she was honest with herself. "Let me make something very clear," Damon said, and now his voice dropped to that dangerous register that made wolves want to bare their throats. "The Moon Goddess doesn't make mistakes. She doesn't choose bonds randomly. When she weaves a connection between souls, it's because those souls are meant for each other." She could feel his wolf through the bond, massive and protective, wrapping around hers like armor. "My mate bears scars from protecting her brother from a rogue attack when she was 10 years old." He let that sink in. "While the rest of you were safe in your homes, this Omega threw herself in front of a feral wolf to save her family. That's not weakness. That's courage." Sarah's throat tightened. No one had ever framed it that way. The attack had always been presented as her failure. She'd been scarred, disfigured, made worthless. The fact that Dylan had walked away without a scratch had never been mentioned as her achievement. And these scars, Damon said, his voice softening fractionally, were used as an excuse to lock her away for 17 years. To hide her, to erase her existence because her family decided she was no longer valuable. Marcus Blackthorn looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. Other families were stepping away from the Blackthorns, physically distancing themselves from the scandal unfolding. "So when I look at my mate," Damon continued, his thumb tracing Sarah's shoulder blade through her dress, "I don't see disfigurement. I see survival. I see strength. And I see exactly what the Moon Goddess intended me to find." The bond blazed between them, responding to his words. Sarah's wolf was howling with joy, with validation, with the fierce satisfaction of being claimed. But the crowd wasn't swayed. Not entirely. She could see it in their faces, the doubt, the judgment, the calculation. Accepting her words were one thing. Actually accepting a scarred Luna was another. And then Vivienne made her move. "Your Majesty," she said, stepping forward with practiced grace, "surely you see that this is complicated? Sarah hasn't been in society for years. She doesn't know how to navigate pack politics, how to represent. Are you questioning my choice?" Damon's voice could have frozen. Vivienne faltered. "No, I just meant, because it sounds like you're suggesting that the Alpha King who has ruled these territories for 15 years, who has never been challenged successfully, who united warring packs through strength alone, don't know how to choose my own mate." "That's not what Or perhaps," he interrupted, his eyes narrowing, "you're suggesting that you would be a better choice. That your perfect face and political training make you more suitable than the Omega the Moon Goddess selected." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Every wolf in the temple understood what he was really saying. "You're challenging divine will. You're putting yourself above the goddess." That was heresy. Unforgivable. Vivienne's face drained of color. "No, Your Majesty, I would never." "Then I suggest you remember your place," Demon said coldly, "and be grateful I'm not punishing your family for the crime of hiding my mate for 17 years. Because that's what it was, technically. Interfering with a fated bond, even unknowingly, was against pack law. Hiding an unmated wolf from ceremonies where bonds might form, that was criminal negligence at best." Marcus Blackthorn dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty, please, we didn't know." "You didn't know because you never cared," Damon said flatly. "You saw scars and decided your daughter was worthless. That's not ignorance. That's cruelty." Sarah watched her family's social standing crumble in real time. Other wolves were backing away from them, unwilling to be associated with a family the Alpha King had just publicly condemned. This was it, the moment her family had feared for 17 years. Exposure, judgment, consequences, and it felt like vindication. But there was still one problem, one massive, unavoidable issue that no one had addressed yet. The bond might be real. Damon might have claimed her publicly, But acceptance from the pack, that was far from guaranteed. She could feel their eyes on her, could sense their judgment, their doubt. Aluna was supposed to be perfect, beautiful, poised, politically skilled, everything she wasn't. The moon priestess stepped forward, her ancient eyes moving between Sarah and Damon. "The bond is formed," she said, her voice carrying supernatural weight. "But for the Alpha King's mate to become Luna, she must be accepted by the pack." There it was, the final test. "The lunar ceremony includes the rite of recognition," the priestess continued. "The assembly must acknowledge the Luna. If the majority rejects her, the bond, though fated, cannot be completed." Sarah's stomach dropped. Of course. There was always a way out. The moon goddess might choose, but the pack had final say. She looked at the crowd, hundreds of wolves, most of whom had just watched her family be publicly humiliated, most of whom could barely stand to look at her scarred face. The vote was going to be a massacre. Part 7, the choice. "Then let's vote," Damon said calmly. Too calmly, Sarah felt his absolute confidence through the bond, but she couldn't understand where it came from. The pack was hostile. The high-ranking families were furious that their daughters had been passed over. Her own family's disgrace would taint her by association. There was no scenario where this ended in her favor. The moon priestess raised her arms and silver light gathered around her. "The rite of recognition will now commence. Those who accept Sarah Blackthorn as the Alpha King's mate, and your Luna, step forward into the circle of truth. Those who reject the bond, remain where you stand." The circle's silver lines blazed to life. No one moved. Sarah's heart sank. The message was clear. The pack was rejecting her without even pretending to consider. Damon's hand tightened on her shoulder, but even his support couldn't change basic pack dynamics. She was an Omega. Scarred, hidden, worthless. Why would anyone accept her as Luna? Then Damon did something unexpected. He stepped away from her. The bond screamed at the separation, both their wolves howling in protest. But he walked to the edge of the circle of truth and turned to face the assembly. "Let me tell you about pack law," he said, his voice carrying that edge of danger that made wolves listen. "The Alpha King's mate, chosen by the moon goddess, becomes Luna regardless of pack opinion. That's tradition. That's divine right." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "But," he continued, "I'm giving you a choice. You can accept my mate freely, step into this circle and welcome your Luna with the respect she deserves." His eyes swept the assembly, meeting alpha gazes, beta postures every dominant wolf present. "Or you can reject her, stand where you are, make your judgment clear." The threat was implicit but undeniable. Reject his mate, and you reject him. "However," Damon said, his voice dropping to that lethal quiet, "if you choose rejection, understand what you're choosing. You're telling me that my mate, the Omega who survived a rogue attack, who endured 17 years of isolation, who stood here tonight and claimed her bond with more courage than most of you have shown in your entire lives, isn't good enough for you. So before you make your choice, ask yourself this. Do you really want to insult the Alpha King's mate? Do you want to question the moon goddess's wisdom? And more importantly," his eyes flashed silver, his alpha aura pressing down on the assembly like a physical weight, "are you prepared to deal with the consequences of that insult?" The temperature in the temple seemed to drop 10 degrees. This wasn't just about accepting a Luna anymore. This was about loyalty, about power, about whether these wolves would stand with their Alpha King or against him. And everyone knew. Standing against Damon Silvercrest was suicide. The first wolf to move was unexpected. A grizzled old alpha from the Eastern Territories, one of the oldest wolves present, stepped into the circle of truth. "I accept Sarah Blackthorn as Luna," he said, his voice gravelly but firm. "The moon goddess's choice is good enough for me." Then another wolf stepped forward, a young beta female. Then an Omega from the Western pack. Then 3 more, 5 more, a dozen. The trickle became a flood. Wolves poured into the circle of truth, alphas and betas and Omegas, high-ranking and low, from every territory. Not all of them, but enough, more than enough. Sarah watched in disbelief as the circle filled. These weren't just symbolic acceptances. She could feel it through the bond, feel their acknowledgement, their willingness to follow, their recognition of her as Luna. Her family remained outside the circle. Of course they did. Vivienne's face was a mask of barely contained rage. Her mother wouldn't even look at her. Only Dylan, her younger brother, had taken a few steps toward the circle before their father grabbed his arm and pulled him back. But it didn't matter, because the majority had spoken. The moon priestess smiled. a rare expression on her ancient face. The pack has chosen. Sarah Blackthorne, step into the circle and accept your place as Luna. Sarah's legs trembled as she walked forward. The silver lines seemed to part for her, welcoming her into their light. When she reached the center, Damon was waiting. He took both her hands, his grip warm and solid. Through the bond, she felt everything: his pride, his satisfaction, his wolf's fierce joy at finally claiming what was his. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. Just for her. For everything to change. His silver eyes held hers. "The moment this ceremony completes, you become Luna. My mate, my equal, and there's no going back." About 17 years of darkness and silence. About a life spent being invisible. "I've never wanted to go back," she said. Damon smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face from terrifying to devastating. "Then let's finish this." He raised their joined hands, and the moon priestess began the final incantation. Silver light wrapped around them, the bond solidifying, strengthening, becoming unbreakable. Sierra felt the exact moment it completed. Felt the pack bond snap into place, connecting her to every wolf who'd stepped into the circle. Felt Damon's presence in her mind, his wolf twining with hers. Felt power flood through her veins, the power of a Luna, recognized and accepted. The moon priestess's voice rang out. "I present to you, by the will of the moon goddess and the choice of the pack, Luna Sarah Silvercrest." The assembly erupted, some in cheers, others in shocked silence, but it was done, irreversible. Damon pulled her close, his hand cupping her scarred cheek. "Mine," he murmured, the word both a promise and a threat to anyone who might challenge it. "Yours," she agreed, and felt her wolf sing with the truth of it. He kissed her then, in front of the entire assembly. Not gentle, not tentative, claiming and possessive and absolute. When they broke apart, his eyes were blazing silver. "Now," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "let's go home." But as they turned to leave, Sarah caught sight of her family one last time. Her father looked destroyed. Her mother was weeping. Vivian's perfect face was twisted with hatred, and Dylan, her younger brother, the one she'd saved all those years ago, was staring at her with something that looked like regret. Too late, she thought. All of it, too late. She was Luna now, and the East Wing, with all its darkness and silence, was nothing but a memory. A memory she would spend the rest of her life making sure no one ever forgot.